Arguably, this is one of the best shoes of 2025, and today we're going to teach you how to recreate this in Blender 3D. First thing we're going to start off is with the form of the shoe. Make sure we get the proportions, everything right. Then we're going to go ahead to the sole, and after the sole, we're going to go to the part I like to call the shell of the shoe, then the nice honeycomb pattern, then our laces, and then we're going to wrap it all up with the tongue and a couple of the tags. And then once we get the texturing, everything done, get this beauty. All right, so let's go ahead and begin with our reference. So one thing we're going to want to do is just load in our reference, and one thing we have to make sure that we get correct is the scale. Now once we have that scale correct, let's go ahead and using a simple cube, extend it out, add a couple of loop cuts, and then we're just going to move the point until we have something that we're satisfied with. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and add a couple more loop cuts and just moving it to fit the form of the shoe. Now this is very important because once we add a subdivision modifier, everything else is going to collapse. So we want to make sure that we have enough points so that everything stays exactly how we want it. All right, now moving forward to our side view, we want to go ahead and line that up with our reference, just taking some points in and moving them up with the proportional editing. And we'll also want to bring these points down also. All right, so we're just moving these points up, and then we're also going to move these down, make sure that we're following the contour of the sole. Now they don't have to be perfect because this will just be the base mesh of what we'll be doing everything, but it's very important to get the foundation as close to the reference so everything else that follows afterwards will be correct and proportional. All right, so we're just going to extrude this up, and then we're going to align this to our reference. There we go, just following the contour of our reference. Make sure we're getting as close as we can. And one thing that I love to do, zero out the position of the vertices so that they look more cohesive with each other. All right, so once we got the form all good and down packed, now let's go ahead and fill up the front faces. As you can see, there we go, everything looking good. So once we have that, now we have to scale it down. Because if we take a look at our reference image, you can see that the front of the shoe, not only is it not symmetrical, it's asymmetrical, and also it's not just straight up and down as you would get from extruding a plane. That's really where the difficulty of modeling sneakers really comes in, because it's so organic but also rigid. You have to pay attention to how the shoe is. That's why you need to have as much reference as you can get your hands on. And even to the point where if you even have to watch other videos on, let's say, like a sneaker review for this shoe and a couple other shoes that I model, I have to go back and just watch a couple sneaker releases, sneaker reviews from different YouTubers and stuff like that, just so I can get different angles of what I'm 3D modeling. So once you understand that, I promise you, you'll be able to model everything. So with that complete, let's go ahead and add some subdivision modifiers. So we're going to go ahead, search subdivision. Now with our subdivision surface added, let's go ahead and hop into the scope mode. Now we're just going to use one simple tool, which is the grab tool and shortcut G. Now with the grab tool, what we're going to do is just push and pull points on our mesh. So let's go ahead and make it bigger, and that's shortcut F. There we go. We're just going to match it up. Now make sure when you're doing this, make sure you're looking at your reference. That's one of the most important things. If you want your shoe to come out accurate, don't make it harder on yourself by doing it on a whim. Look at your reference so that you can get the correct proportions, because it's going to make your model look 10 times better. Now with the grab tool, we're just going to continue to grab a couple of these points following our reference. We looking at a top down, a side view, a bottom view, all the views that we can get to make sure that all around the shoe is correct. There we go. Let's pull out a couple more. There you go. Now, one of the interesting things when you're looking at footwear, the bottom sole is smaller than the actual upper, so you get this hanging effect. Now, if we have all these jagged edges, don't worry about them because we're gonna go ahead and smooth it out. You can either do this with a smooth brush, or you can just go back into edit mode and right click smooth vertices, and this will normalize all the sharps and vertices. Now this is a great way to smooth out your model without going into the sculpt mode. All right, so with that smoothed out, let's go ahead and continue to refine our shape. Now when I'm refining my shape in the sculpt mode, I'm always looking at reference. As you can see right here, I'm looking at the top down view, which is, I can arguably say, one of the most important reference that you should have if you're just going to use a few. So with that being said, we're going to continue to refine it and continue to just push and pull some of the things. Now, one thing that I notice when sculpting, that sometimes I could pull one side and it's uneven. So it's very important that when you're grabbing your mesh, make sure that you're also looking at the opposite side. You don't have symmetry activated. And the reason I don't have symmetry activated because our shoe is asymmetrical. So there's some workarounds that you can go about doing this, but I just like to just do it this way where I have full control over and I'm not worrying about adjusting it later on. So as you can see, I'm just flip-flopping between the two views to make sure that what I do on the right side is copied to the left side manually. All right, we're going to continue to just push and pull. And as you can see, now the form of the shoe is coming together. And like I said, the upper of the shoe hangs off the sole, so that's why the upper is a little thicker than the sole whenever you're modeling. That we have our final adjustments all good, we're ready to start moving forward. So what I'm doing here is just projecting the texture onto our base mesh. Now this is going to help us when we're actually creating each panel and the shell and also the sole of the shoe versus flip-flopping back to our actual flat plane. Now we have a 3D surface that we can just trace with also. And as you can see, I'm turning off my model. Now once I got that, it's just a little bit adjustment, because sometimes when you're going through the scope and you're going through these edit mode adjustments, you sometimes lose the true form from the reference. So just go back and make sure that it's lining up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just close enough. And see, we're just going to create this indent, just grabbing some points and pushing it up. Now let's go ahead and move on to the sole. All right, first thing we're going to do, we're going to create a point and turn on face projecting in our snapping menu. Now this is very important so that everything that we do is now sticking to that base mesh which we created. Now we just want to extend the point and follow the curvature of the sole. Make sure we're not going above that center line or below it. Now once we get to the toe box, we also have to look at our top down reference so that we can get the actual shape of how the toe box is going around the initial form. So as you can see, I'm looking at the top down view, making sure it lines up, and also going back and forth between the side profile and also the top. Upper line complete. Let's go ahead and extrude this down. Now with snapping enable, you'll see how it's snapping to the bottom. So right now, just adjusting those points to line up with our reference. Sometimes when you're working in another view, you can get off track. We're just going to go ahead and select two of our lines, our edges, and go ahead and fill them in. There we go. And want to add a loop cut right there and there to make sure that we have all quads when we're filling the faces in. Filling in all my faces, I noticed that I had a triangle. So what I did was just delete that whole face, and I realized simple is better. So I just did a square without additional points. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to creating the shell of the shoe. All right, for the shell, what we're going to do is just take the point of our top sole and we're going to duplicate it. So with P, we're going to make sure that it's a new selection, and then we're going to go into edit mode. Now, once in edit mode, let's go ahead and extrude this up. Now you can see it's not snapping to our surface because we have to turn on snapping. So let's go ahead and turn that on. Now we're just going to adjust these points so that they're lining up with the shell. What I like to do when I'm lining this up is if there's any distinctive shape within my model, I like to model around that first. Now you're probably wondering, why would you do that? And why not just extrude it up and then use the knife tool? I found in my workflow that actually doing it this way gives you way more control, and it's also easier to have a better topology once you do it like this versus just having all quads and you extrude it up and then you're making knife points and then you have to delete some points, add some points, and it just can get messy really quick. But with this, you know exactly the shape that you want because you created it. Now we're just going to add a loop cut right here, and then we're going to finish aligning our point with the outer edge of our shell, which is part of this honeycomb design. All right, and this right here is where you're going to run into issues. When you have a straight plane going into a curved surface, you're going to do a little finessing. So once we add a loop cut, what I like to do is just bevel it out just a little bit so that I have a little bit more points to cover that curved part right here. Additional geometry created, we just want to make sure that we're spacing out our topology. All right, so now once that's complete, let's go ahead and fill in these faces right here. As you can see, I'm really emphasizing quad topology. Make sure that there's no triangles. This is pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is just extrude these points out following our reference image, and then once we're completed with our first initial outline, then we're going to go ahead and add some faces to this, which is just selecting everything and hitting F to fill it in. Honestly, I think this is the most satisfying part about, you know, retopologizing and also modeling your texture, is just figuring out how to fix problems. So as you can see, we do not have all quads here, and what I need is to have essentially a loop cut around the initial state. How do I go about that? Honestly, I just like to delete things. If you don't know where to start, just delete something, because you can always just go back, but just delete it, see how it fits, see how we can create a quad. And if you can't, add some cuts either with the knife tool or selecting 2 points and hitting J. So as you can see, I'm getting that shape just a little bit better, just working and moving some points along the way. See, I'm deleting some points, subdividing, and then hitting J to select all of them together and to create a new edge. Now you can see we have a better. So we went from this to this, and as you can see, it looks way nicer and also cleaner. Now this is going to be very important when we're going to start working on our honeycomb shape. Now just fixing these points, aligning them, continuing to do the same process until we get something that's cleaner. Now sometimes it's easy to overcomplicate your geometry just by adding a whole bunch of loop cuts to get that curve section, but well, like I said, simple is better. You can see we get that nice smooth topology. Let's go ahead and finish up our shell. So now we're on the top down view, and we're going to make sure that we're getting that nice oval shape that's lining up with our sock. Go ahead and fill our faces in. Let's just do a check to see how it's fitting in with our sole that we created. Let's go ahead and start working on our upper. Now for the upper, it's the same concept that we use for the shell of the shoe. We're gonna go ahead and duplicate a portion of our shell and just extrude it out. Now one thing that I like to do is to extrude out the full length of what I'm doing, and then just add loop cuts to adjust versus extruding a little bit, out again, and doing it that way. There we go. I want to add a couple loop cuts to give us a little bit more geometry so that we're following the curvature of our base model. There we go. Now we just want to line it up. I don't want to do the full length because we will be mirroring each part of the shoe. Now I'm going to go ahead and extrude it and just line it up with our reference image. Adding a couple more loop cuts and just bringing that back in because we don't want it to go beneath the sole. Extruding points and snapping onto face, you do sometimes get your geometry looking a little wonky. So one thing that I like to do to fix that is just to slide what I can, but let's say it's a large area that needs fixing or needs to be smoothed out. So one thing we could do is just select everything all together after making sure that there's no empty holes or anything. And then we can either go to bridge tools and relax, or we can just go to smooth vertices. Now I love the smooth vertices because it just makes your topology look even 10 times better by smoothing out those points and making them look more uniform. Let's go work on the heel counter of the shoe. Now the heel counter of the shoe is very simple. We're literally going to duplicate and remove it from the section of our upper, and we're just going to shoot it to follow the shape of the shoe. Let's go ahead and extrude it inwards. Now we're going to go ahead and add some faces, and I just want to add just a little bit more geometry, so I'm going to go ahead and add a loop cut, and then we're going to add 2 more loop cuts. And now we have to go ahead and rearrange our vertices so that it looks a little bit better. So what you can do is just select them, right click, and hit relax faces. Let's add some thickness to see how it's shaping out and how everything is coming together. All right, now moving on to the honeycomb pattern. One thing that we're going to want to do is select the outer ring of our honeycomb pattern, and we're just going to bevel it so that we have some geometry to work with. Now when beveling, you can have some overlapping geometry like this, but it's a quick fix. All you have to do is just hit double G and slide your vertices over. Now with that complete, let's go ahead and make sure that this is going all around and that we have a nice edge flow. So we just need to add a couple more points and connect them with F. Now once they're all connected and we have a perfect loop, let's go ahead and select that loop, and then we're also just gonna extrude it in just a little bit so that we have that indent. Now let's go ahead and reselect the outer edges, and then we're gonna hit bevel so that we have some sharpness when we add our subdivision modifier. Now you can see how crispy it looks. Now one thing that we have to keep in mind before we go to our honeycomb pattern, because it is somewhat a destructive process, so we have to make sure that how we want it to flow on our shoe is exactly how it's going to be. So with that being said, we have to hop into scope mode and make sure that nothing's intersecting, everything looks good, so that we can go ahead and extract our honeycomb base and apply our pattern. So right here, we're just going to take our grab brush, make sure that there's nothing peeking out, make sure everything looks good. As you can see, some of the upper is out past the sole, but that's a quick fix. We're just going to take our grab brush and push it in. Now one thing that I love to do is to look at my model in ambient occlusion mode, and this is what the cycles render. If you go up to this tab, hit ambient occlusion, you can see that we have a white base, but we also can see the shadows. Go back into sculpting mode and just use the grab brush just to close the gap so that there's not that many gaps in between each piece that we're laying upon each other. Now that we have everything cohesive and everything is sticking together, back to the honeycomb pattern. With selecting the inner of this region, we're gonna go ahead and separate it. So P, separate by selection, new mesh that we can use to apply our pattern onto. So the first step to our pattern, we're just gonna go ahead and create the shape. Now we're gonna bevel the edges, and then we're gonna collapse the edges by merging the points to the center. Then we're gonna go ahead and scale it down. Then once we scale it down, we're gonna go ahead and add a array modifier. And we're not just gonna use one modifier. We're gonna use a couple of these array modifiers so that we get a grid-like shape. Now you could have done this with geometry nodes, but just to keep it simple for those who aren't acclimated with geometry nodes, so that anyone watching this, if you're a beginner, you can follow along with these steps that I'm doing. I have multiple array modifiers, and we have the factor X, Y, and Z. Now that is what I'm using to just place them in this pattern. Now I want to make sure that we're adjusting the Y, not too much space, and also the Z. There we go, and we're increasing the count. Now once we have a count that we like, let's go ahead and add another modifier to extend our pattern even more. There we go, and we're just going to align it by using the X, something like that. And we're just gonna align this one along the Y. All right, with our array complete, let's go ahead and move this over to our reference. So now we can start to align these up with the actual reference behind it. Now, as you can see, we might have to just scale it down just a little bit and place it until it's almost close. Now we're just gonna go ahead and apply all the modifiers that we created and go jump into our sculpt mode. And now we're just gonna use the grab brush and move these points until they're lining up close with our reference. These smaller cone shapes, we're gonna have to distort it a lot. So we're gonna have to go to the edge and then we're just gonna push it down. And as we're pushing it down, you can see how our honeycomb shape is getting smaller in certain areas. We're gonna go ahead and select the mesh and also go into edit mode. And then we're gonna go down to mesh, knife project. Now with knife project, how it works, the patterns that you selected onto your mesh. So now you can see we have that honeycomb shape essentially cut into our pattern. Now with this selected, we're gonna go ahead and extrude it just a little bit. All right, so you can see how it looks a little funny and our shading is terrible. So one thing that we're gonna do is add a subdivision modifier and keep it low because our mesh is already dense. And then we're gonna just play around with the shade to smooth it and hop back into cycles and see how everything is meshing together. All right, you can see we have a couple gaps and we're gonna fix that with the sculpting, just looking at our reference. Eyelet is very simple. We're just going to take a torus, we're going to scale it down, and using snap, we're just going to snap it to the faces so that it aligns perfectly. So we have one side complete. We're going to go ahead and duplicate it on the other side, and with using the snap, we're going to snap it on this surface. Now let's go ahead and work on the tongue and some other pieces of the shoe. All right, so one thing that we're going to do, we're just going to take a portion of the mesh that we already created from the upper, and we're going to duplicate it and separate it by selection. And then we're just going to add just a little bit thickness. We're going to go ahead and extrude it up following the curvature of our reference image. Here we go, right there, right there. Just enough geometry to follow those curves. Now, once we get to this point, what we're going to do is select the sides and we're going to extrude it down. So now you can see how we're getting that tongue shape, and we're just going to adjust some of these points. There we go. Making sure that everything we do on one side, we do on the other side also. One thing I noticed when doing the tongue, that it just looked a little too skinny. So if I look from the top down view of our reference image, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You could see on the left side how the tongue is a little bit thicker and wider. So to adjust that, I have to adjust the whole entire mesh. So I just jumped right back into sculpt mode and just started to adjust it to make the foot placement a little wider. And then with that being said, we also have to adjust the other layers because they're not yet merged. So just going, using the grab tool, adjusting the panels, adjusting the layers, make sure that everything looks good, nothing's intersecting with each other. Let's go ahead and move on to our laces. So first thing that we're going to do to attack the laces, we're going to go ahead and duplicate our eyelet, and we're going to go ahead and scale it down. Now, when we scale it down, we want to make sure that it's as small as we can get it, and then we just want to merge all the points. What this is going to do is give us individual points directly in the middle of our eyelets. Now, once we have that, let's go ahead and start to connect them. What I'm doing to connect them is just selecting both points and hitting F to make a connecting edge. All the edges, we want to add a couple loop cuts and subdivisions so that we can apply each point to the tongue using the snap mode. Now, once we complete that, let's go ahead and convert this to a curve. Curve selected, let's go ahead to our curve tab or curve. And if we go down to our panel, I know it's a little cut off and I do apologize for that. We're going to go to bevel, and underneath bevel, we're going to select object. Now, what we need to do is create a curved circle, which will be the profile of our extrusion for our curve. Select our curved circle and scale it up. You'll see that we are now affecting our curve. Now, in order to fix the scaling issue, we're just going to select our curved circle and select origin to geometry. Also scale it down so that the thickness of our laces are not as wide. There we go, and add subdivision to smooth it out. Now let's go ahead and add some thickness. I'm gonna add a little bit of thickness so our model doesn't look like it was just made out of paper. All right, so going back to the tongue, now let's go ahead and enlarge it just a little bit. We're gonna select the top and just scale it on the x-axis, and then we're just gonna take a couple of the points and then just shrink them down so that it's a little bit smoother. With everything in place, let's go ahead and model the final detail of our shoe. It's extremely easy because of the way we modeled it in the beginning. So we're going to go ahead and select all of these, and then we're just going to inset it a little bit. And then once we're finished insetting it, we're going to go ahead and push it in. There we go. Going to slightly extrude it in right there. Perfect. Now, if we look at the model, we can see that the back end of our design is a little bit more smoother. So one thing that we're going to do, we're going to select these 2 back points right here, and also select these 2 also. And we're going to right click smooth vertices. Now this is going to smooth it out so it transitions to the rest of the sole. So we're going to go ahead and select a little bit more points, right click, smooth vertices. So now you can see we're not getting that harsh edge, and we're getting a nice smooth transition to the rest of the midsole. All right, so let's go ahead and work on the top part. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to select both of them, right click, smooth vertices, and then we're just going to change this slider. It's on 0.5 now. We're just going to slide it up till we get a more gradual change in the surface direction. There we go. Going to select that, and now you can see how it's extremely smooth, but at the front it's keeping that crisp detail. So that concludes everything for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned a lot. Stay tuned for the next couple of videos that'll be coming out, where we'll be going over texturing, the laces, and a lot more content to come. So that's all for today. Hope you guys have a blessed year.